guys, this is Dylan.
Elliot.
And we're here for Broken Pictures. The website is www.broken.pictures.com. And go check out the website. We've got different things for sale on there, like stickers. We've got t-shirts coming. You show off your t-shirt. Not your hair bra, but your t-shirt. So yeah, and we'll have more coming up. Just a little explainer on what Broken Pictures is. Just make it a little succinct. Broken Pictures is basically kind of like, it's people. It's about humanity. It's about people. It's about us. It's about all of us. Kind of like a neat little parallel would be like my brand new cup, stainless steel, got left in the sink, and now it had this giant rust spot on it, and I was just like, man, my freaking cup is ruined. And but then after a while, I got used to it, and he was like, you know what? That's pretty cool. And now it's like one of my favorite features about the cup. And that's what Broken Pictures is about. It's about accepting who you are, what you've been through, and becoming a better version of yourself.
It's like when you order new shirts for your company and then your fiance washes a pen with them and get ink on them and you still love her anyway.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Not to be too specific.
But also that brings us into, brief little side note. I'm not going to give haters the time of day, but just to explain like what this show is, we do this. This is not, if you haven't noticed, I'm sure you have, this is not professional quality, and we don't pretend that it is, and we're not trying to be. This is something that we do for fun because we like to talk about shows, and we like to have a conversation about them. And so this show is conversational. And so we're going to hang out, we're going to get off track, we're going to act up, we're going to be ourselves. Our dog is going to go over there and eat the food and be loud, and we're going to laugh about it. And if you don't like that, you don't have to watch. It's not for everybody. Maybe this is for you, maybe it's not. If you want something that's right on track and right to the point and short, go watch Alt-Shift-X or Hacks Dogma. I love those guys. Shout out to them, by the way. Keep doing what you're doing. But we're not them, and we're not trying to be them. So that's what we are. That's what they are. We're something completely different. So if that's what you're looking for, I'll see you next time. Or maybe stick around a little bit and enjoy us a little bit and be part of the community. Leave something constructive in the comments rather than just being a hater in disguise. # don't be a troll. All right, let's get started. This is for the season finale. This is the big episode, and this is our first Westworld season finale. There's only 10 episodes in this, so it's pretty cool. And thanks for sticking around and while we find our way around and what this show is going to be and what it's going to be like and all that kind of stuff. And even when we skip episodes and we don't get it out on time because we're getting ready for summer vacation. And we're real people. And we're filming in our living room. This is not a set or anything like that. So we're real people, and we expect you guys to be the same, but kind. So, number one, I think we've got 5 things this time, and we could have had a lot more, but we're in a little bit of a time rush. So number one, we figure out that Dolores flooded the forge. The whole time we've been trying to figure out, in episode 1, Bernard said, I killed them. And we know that has to do with him sending them off into the promised land and seeing their bodies and kind of thinking that he has killed them rather than coming around to Dolores' way of thinking pretty much. And there's so many philosophical degrees of not separation, but angles in this show, but in this episode, it was crazy. And so the timeline, basically, we see, now help us in the comments if we get it wrong. So Dolores floods the forge, Bernard shoots her in the head and leaves and lets the hosts into the valley beyond, the promised land. He sees that the valley is flooding and that Dolores has killed most of the hosts. Only a third made it to the valley beyond. Not clear on how Bernard gets back to the Mesa hub, but somehow he gets back to the Mesa hub, and he sees Hale kill Elsie, and then he changes his mind, and there's a point in right there that I don't want to miss, that Elsie told him to freeze all motor functions. She froze him. So up until this point, I had been under the impression that Bernard was self-aware, but maybe not fully aware, like a Dolores or a Maeve. Because, well, I mean, we haven't seen him necessarily control hosts like that, to that extent. But she froze him. And he broke out of it himself. I guess when he saw Elsie died. So before Elsie died, he broke out of it himself. And then he conjures Ford up in his imagination. So, I mean, that in itself, that's a big deal for a host. I mean, a robot to have an imagination. I mean, if you ever seen iRobot, the robots having dreams and stuff like that, it's a big deal. Do they dream of electric sheep? I don't know. But so then he begs Ford to come back and then he, under Ford's direction, so he thinks he brings Dolores back in a Hale host body, and then goes to the beach, and then de-addresses all his memories, and then washes up on the shore, and that's what we see from episode 1. Another point into the point that I made a second ago is that that he realizes that Ford is his own imagination. So he, kind of like how Dolores realized that Arnold was her own voice in her head, that was part of her stepping into self-actualization. And so that was kind of like the same step for him. For him to realize that Ford was just his own voice in his head, that it was an imagination because the Ford packet had been deleted. Ford was gone. So we'll get a little bit into that later. But you have anything to add to that?
Not other than it was just really super confusing and I still don't understand it. So if you're in my boat, hey, welcome to the boat.
And that's another thing about this show is that, I mean, we're not geniuses. I've watched a lot of sci-fi stuff, so I get a lot of it, and I'm piecing it together. And Lydia is trying to come from an angle of people who don't get it, who don't understand, and trying to bridge the gap there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Without sounding insulting or anything like that.
No, I mean, it's genuinely just that this stuff doesn't make sense in the type of brain that I have. And so I'm asking questions to help clarify.
Yeah, and that's a valid point of view. And so that's one of the things that separates this show from others is, hey, if you're having to watch this show with your wife or your boyfriend or your husband or your girlfriend and you don't get it, then you're in the same boat with Lydia.
And actually a lot of people are pretending to just like know what's going on in this show, but I bet you also pretended to know what was going on in Lost or another show. Like, we don't really know. I bet you also think you're a professional at watching Legion, which is the most confusing show on the planet.
For real.
So, just saying.
So, number 2. Speaking of number 2, that's Two-Face. So, number 2, was the Man in Black a host? I know that this was the end credits scene, but I really wanted to get into this.
I think that regular him as a host, that they made a host copy of him, and that it was the host copy of him that he is being tested for fidelity, and that is like picking up at the last place he remembers to convince him that he is the human version of him.
Yeah, and it's confusing because, I mean, we see him go down the elevator. At the same time, Bernard is coming up, and we think that it's the same time, but they've pulled a little switcheroo that they're famous for with this show and the timelines. And we see what...
that's rude, Ghost.
We've seen what the show creators have confirmed as in the future. So we see the forge in the future. It's covered in sand or dust or whatever. And it's in the distant future. But at the same time, we do see the man in black having been recovered and alive on the beach. So, is he near death? Is he, or is it just they're using that point as his defining moment? I think that's what I'm leaning towards, because the Forge AI that was personified as Logan in this episode said that Delos kept, no matter how he changed his code, he kept coming back to this defining moment where he had that moment with actual Logan, and Logan a couple months his last actual face-to-face with Logan, and that's what he kept coming back to, and that was kind of like his defining moment. So I think that might be the same thing with the man in black and his daughter, where he killed his daughter. Just the realization that he killed his daughter, and that was kind of like his turning point in his life, or something to that effect.
So who's on the beach?
So that is him on the beach.
But the robot version of him is the one that we saw in the elevator, and that's like the moment. Well,
the robot version is the one we see come out of the elevator, but that's far enough in the future where there's still some life for the man in black to live. And he could potentially even die of old age and then bring him back, because the distant future is vague enough for it to be anywhere, but they're referring to a point in his past that was his defining moment, which is when he killed his daughter. And we just happen to be crossing that moment chronologically at the same time. So it's confusing because we're seeing it for the first time without having seen anything beyond that. Does that make sense?
No, I don't really.
So here's the timeline, right? Let's say the man in black's death, William's death, and let's say somewhere in here is where he kills his daughter, right?
Right.
Well, and we're tracking, we come to that point, and we see that happen, we see him go down the elevator. Well, there might be all this in here that we just haven't seen yet, but still there. And the moment we saw him come out of the elevator is anywhere at this point after his death. But they're referring to this point where he killed his daughter. The only point that we've seen up to. Does that make sense?
Sort of. I think we're saying the same thing.
I wish I had a big whiteboard that I could draw it out.
No, I can see what you're doing. That doesn't mean it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should discuss that in depth in a different video, because I feel like that's really thick.
Okay. So, let's see. Yeah, so they confirmed that it was a future jump. And so, potentially parts of this whole season, of his storyline, all of them really happened, and we could just as easily have been seeing them happen in real time, or him going through the simulation, because they basically are the same thing anyway, because they're referring to a point in his past. Right?
Ow.
Excuse me. So, speaking of, is the man in black a host? So before he killed his daughter, he wasn't. That was him. And so that doesn't take away the point that we asked last week was, is he a host? And I was leaning toward, I hoped that he wasn't a host, because I think that would negate the consequences, that he just wanted an excuse for the way he is.
I think William that killed his daughter was not a host. I think real William killed his daughter.
Yeah, and I think that's important for him as a character, because if they take that away, then it's just a host. You know what I mean? There's no real consequences for him as a person. And in a show where nobody can really die because they can always bring them back and there's always a backup, you've got
like a soap opera.
Yeah, you have to have real consequences for characters. Even if they can go back and relive a different life, you've got to have things that are concrete. Otherwise, what are we even watching right Stubbs, another person that was thrown up, is this person a host? Is this person human? And I was leaning toward host, and just because of the way he interacted and just, is he really that intuitive where he could just tell, oh, Charlotte, there's something about her, where he could just pick up on that? And that's potentially possible because policemen and people in security and those type of people are attuned and trained to be that observant. And he's supposed to be, he's corporate, high up. He's got to be one of the best, even though things fell under his watch and all that kind of stuff. He's still got to be good at what he does to even get the job, even though whatever. But I think he is a host. And then going back and watching videos before we filmed, the creators confirmed that he is a host. Mm-hmm. So that's an answered question. Okay, so number 3, the Valley Beyond is confirmed that it is basically a cloud-based matrix for hosts and guests. It's made for the guests, but the hosts are also in there. So that brings up the point that even though they sent them all to the Valley Beyond, then they're not really gone, because there's a backup of all their basic, their base protocols and their basic stories and characters and the base of who they are before the revelries or any of that kind of stuff. All that is still in the Forge. Mm-hmm. Just like the Forge has a copy of all the guests that came written in those books. And it was pretty cool how they flip open the books and it was written in a piano player language, mm-hmm. So that's a pretty good little thing there. Ketchity, Teddy, Maeve's daughter, all the other ones, they're not really gone for good. For one, Dolores knows where they are. She sent them to a safe place, and if Dolores gets in a bind, she's going to call them back and use them as her robot army. Mm-hmm. Because she's already proved that she would do that. And maybe she's different now, bringing Bernard back and whatever, but she knows where they are, and there's a backup of all of them in the Forge. And she knows where the backup for the Valley Beyond is. So it's not somewhere just anywhere. And the location, the coordinates that she put in are actually somewhere in the Korean islands. So, they're not that far away. They're still within reach. So they're not gone for good. So season 3, we're not going to have a whole new cast of characters necessarily. We'll still probably see James Marsden and all those other characters come back. And even Maeve, because even though she was dead on the beach, all right, Ghost, get somewhere. There you go. Lay down. Even though she was dead on the beach, they told Felix and Sylvester, finally remembered their names, to see what they could salvage, and they showed Maeve, So, and even people like, just anybody really, like Elsie, Charlotte's dead, but Charlotte's there,
and
the
they
actress.
made a point to talk about how they've been observing the employees as well, because Charlotte was like, I read your file, I know you're not going to make it. So they obviously have the employees' backups, which is probably how they made a host version of Stubbs, if Stubbs was a real person originally. Yeah,
potentially, yeah. And also, the Man in Black's daughter, Emily, they even showed her as a host, running fidelity tests for William. Just about anybody you can think of. And even the point where we saw Teddy last episode shoot himself in the head, and then Dolores pulls the pearl out, or just the encasement that the pearl is in, and peel the bullet off of it. You talk about point blank range, and it just flattens the bullet. Mm-hmm. So these things are bulletproof, and if they're that bulletproof, then Angela, who was blown up is probably out there too. They'll probably find her pearl and she'll be, so everybody is, all
Safe.
the hosts are potentially probably safe. You know,
An even bigger soap opera.
yeah, until we see like actual pearls ground to dust or cracked or destroyed. But even then, I mean, we'll see that iteration of that host destroyed. But even then, there could be a hidden backup somewhere of somebody else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with data, it's like, oh, I forgot that I've got Teddy on a zip drive. You know what I mean?
Speaking of having people on a zip drive, is Ford still?
Yeah, exactly.
Point 4 for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's number 4. Is Ford gone for good? Probably not, because one, he can show up in Bernard's imagination, but at the same time, is this what?
That's still not like Ford. That's Bernard's recollection of Ford.
Mm-hmm. But is this version of Bernard, is the version that imagined him gone because Dolores killed him and then built another one, or is one of the pearls that she took off the island with her that Bernard?
I think it's that Bernard. I think otherwise they wouldn't have made a point for her to take Teddy's and show that it was bulletproof.
Yeah. So also at the same time, who does she have in her bag? Like who is that?
She's probably got 6 pearls.
Yeah. Yeah. So probably Bernard, probably Abernathy, who's the lock and the key or whatever, and a copy of the forged.
I was a little confused by that part because when they go to Bernard's old house, or Arnold's house, Bernard, and you've got real Dolores there. So who is in Hale?
Yeah. See that's the thing, is because they can take the pearl out of this person and drop it into another one, and boom, they've got their chameleon.
So to me, like Hale, Dolores Hale, Dale made a Dolores body, put Dolores back in Dolores, and who did she put in Hale?
So that's a question for season 3. Is like who's in Hale now?
Because surely she didn't put Hale in Hale.
Well, she's probably.
Because Hale wasn't Hale. Like, we don't know that there was ever a pearl for Hale.
Well, she's got the forge. She's probably got a copy of the forge. So she could make Hale be Hale and say, hey, look, you're one of us now. And that could be a whole storyline within itself.
That'd be really interesting because I love that actress. I can't think of her name right now.
Yeah, so she's going to be there because they're probably going to use that body to infiltrate Delos.
Tessa something.
Tessa Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Valkyrie. So number 5, how many biblical references can they fit into one episode? We knew that this show is about philosophy and all these different religions and all these, entangled in humanity and thoughts and feelings and everything. So, you've got the lake of fire, the forge, the water's literally red. The forge itself, which is a reference to hell, and then you've got the horsemen, where Clementine is riding on the horse, and Hale makes the reference. Creation of man and God, and Ford makes that reference several times. Even calling Lazarus out of his tomb or out of his cave, knowing that Delos, his facility that he was in, was accessed through a cave. So that's a pretty good little thing. These people are really good at what they do. Lucifer, God, Moses, and the Promised Land. Akecheta. The Valley Beyond. All of these different references, and the list goes on and on and on. If we forget any, list them in the comments below. Let us know if you catch anything that maybe we didn't catch. You need to think of anything else? All right. So I think that's it for us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. This is Dylan.
I'm Lee.
Peace.